Hello everyone, Konnichiwa. Today we'll be looking at some kanji techniques, so how we can improve our kanji, learn lots of kanji, and more importantly, have techniques which allow us to put lots of kanji in our head without forgetting them. All the materials we're going to go through today you can find in the Google Doc in the description. We're mainly going to be looking at a website called Kanji Damage. Now I've got no affiliation with this website, I just came across it with my own study, and I found it to be probably one of the best kanji websites that's available. Now we're going to go into using this website a little bit. One thing I will say about this website is it's not exactly PG-13, all right? There's a fair bit of swearing and there's some kind of dirty jokes in there because these are all like mnemonics to help you remember the words. So if kind of coarse language and in Japanese what you would call shimoneta is not really your goal, it's not really what you want to do, probably don't use this website, that's all I'll say. It's unfortunate because I think it kind of takes away from what's a very good resource. But anyway, if you're okay with that, I think we'll be fine. So the links for everything will be in the Google Doc. I'm a Japanese tutor, so I help you if you're an absolute beginner in Japanese. I teach a lot of people actually in this kind of camp. These are people who either went to school and didn't quite learn it as well as they'd like to, or maybe you finish school and you want to go to Japan and do some sightseeing. I've got lots of students like this, and within 6 months or so with consistent study, I can definitely get you to speaking at a pretty good level. Kanji is obviously going to take a little bit longer, but I think this website in particular can help a lot of people with their kanji, and it really has, I've kind of found this website a little bit too late, to be honest. I've already spent enough time studying kanji that I'm kind of across it, but I do use this website a lot to kind of supplement kanji that I forget a lot. So I found that to be very good, but I think this website is awesome for someone who's got no kanji experience. It's a very good progression through basically simple kanji to more complex kanji, and it's in a very logical way. I also do tutoring for high school students and uni students who are looking to supplement their marks, maybe finding year 11, year 12 a bit hard. So I do a lot of that as well. And this is really what I specialize in. I specialize in exam preparation, okay? So getting you the best marks you can for your final exams or year 11 exams. Now I do face-to-face lessons if you live in kind of the Perth metro area, but I also do online lessons. So I'm a lot more flexible with the times of the online lessons. And my general policy is that they're cheaper than the face-to-face lessons because I don't have to travel. And the main reason I would recommend these is that, look, if you take an online lesson with me and you find it doesn't work for you, it's free. Okay, that's how I operate. I know a lot of people are maybe a bit reluctant about doing an online lesson, but I mean, what I do here is basically an online lesson. I'm able to display things on the screen. I can write things. I've got a Google Doc that we can both type into, and I can send you all materials, for example, through Dropbox. So all these things can be accessed very easily, and I'm confident that it's the same, and if not better, than a face-to-face lesson. So I'd really encourage you guys, if you've ever thought about learning Japanese, or maybe you're struggling with Japanese in school, send me an email. My details are on this flyer here, and I'd be happy to chat with you about some times we can look into it. All right, let's get into it. So, 今日は4日2月2019年. Okay, so this is what the website looks like. It's Kanji Damage. It's pretty straightforward, really. Now you can see here he's talking about learning 1700 kanji. Now trust me, once you know 1700 kanji, this is pretty good. I mean, you could definitely, you would have no trouble reading a lot of things in Japan. I don't know how many kanji I would know, but I would think I know about 2000 at least, 2500. And I just got back from Japan myself. I haven't been there for quite a few years, and I've noticed that my reading ability is way better. And it's really, since I've been there, I've learned about 500 or 1000 new kanji. So it makes a massive difference. Obviously, if you can get to 700, you're doing pretty well. Now, what is this kind of in terms of like a Japanese person? Well, it's probably about half of what a Japanese person would know. So that's pretty impressive. And of course, a lot of kanji that Japanese people know are not super useful. The kind of old kanji which you don't use anymore. So these ones are very useful kanji And definitely if you knew all of these, I would say you could read most newspaper articles probably pretty well. At least you could understand the gist of them. The other thing he says here is it's about using yo mama jokes, okay? So he does use a lot of jokes and things, and this is just a mnemonic, right? So a mnemonic is a kind of device that you can use in your head. It's like a little story you can tell yourself, and then it helps you to remember it. So the one I just thought of then is the kanji for yorokobu, okay? Yorokobu is happiness, and I always forgot this kanji. It looks like a few other kanji, and I always forget which one it was and what strokes it has. And then he has this story, which is the samurai throws beans in his mouth, because we have a samurai on top, and then we have bean in the middle, and then there's mouth down the bottom there, okay? So you just have to remember the story like that, and then you can write it. Anyway, we will go through it. He talks about he's got an Anki deck. If you've never used Anki before, I would really recommend it. It's just kind of a flashcard app, but what you do is you can create your own flashcards, and you can access other people's created flashcards, and that's what this is. Okay. So let's go through a few features. I mean, I'm not going to go through this line by line, but just kind of get a philosophy of where this guy is. Actually, I don't know who wrote this, guy or girl. We'll just say guy, gender neutral. But there's a few things that he's done which I really like about this. First thing here, we see bogus joyo kanji have been cut. Now, again, joyo is a bit of an advanced concept, but the joyo kanji is like the everyday use kanji, and this is a list that's kind of curated by the Japanese government. And I think, for example, if you want to give your kid a name, the kanji has to appear on the joyo kanji list, for example. It's broken down into its components. Now we are going to look at this in quite a lot of detail, but it's just like that thing I said with the yorokobu kanji. You just kind of have to remember the elements, and then you just kind of go bop, 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 and you kind of put them all together. You got hints to tell lookalike kanji apart, and man, I really wish I'd had this when I was learning kanji. This is a big problem for a lot of people, especially if, like me, you're kind of self-taught. You don't recognize that kanji look alike. You just think it's the same kanji, or you don't notice that there's difference between the two. So it's really good he has this. There's some tags. We'll look at these a bit later, but they're quite good. We have the mnemonics, which I already mentioned before. Now I'm going to talk about all these things, meanings, radicals, and onyomi, but anyway. Particles taught with the words. Now again, really, really important, okay? And he does go through this a little bit in the website. But the issue with a lot of kanji study books is that they teach you words that the kanji are used in, all right? So you might have some kanji and you learn a word in it, but the problem is you don't actually know if that's a common word or not, because just because it uses a common kanji, it doesn't mean it's a common word. And I remember I've had so many examples like this over my life, but I remember one of them was I learned the word koyomi, which you can kind of say is a calendar. And so, you know, I had my book and I learned it, and it was a pretty straightforward kanji, and I learned that it meant calendar. And I thought, great, you know. So I tend to try and use the Japanese word, because Japanese people tended to say kalendar, and I thought, oh, I'll just use koyomi. Now I remember I said it to a Japanese person, and they just gave me this look as if they had no idea what I was talking about, because it turns out that koyomi is not just a calendar. It's the Japanese style calendar that uses the Japanese date system. So when they want to refer to what I believe is called the Julian calendar, like the one that we're kind of used to, like all around the world, the kind of standard calendar, that's you call that kalendar. Okay, so these are two different concepts, and you would never know that from the entry in the textbook. Okay, so he tends to teach these words with a lot of context and the particles that you use them, okay, so that you get a bit of grammar, because this is what I found. It still is really a problem for me. I know all these words, but perhaps I don't know the best way to put them in a sentence, okay? I kind of have to guess, and generally I'm right, because they just follow the Japanese grammatical rules, but not always. We got the nuances, okay? This is another big issue with Japanese textbooks, and he does a very good job actually of explaining that. Well, like these examples here, all three of these could be read as katai, but he basically says that, you know, one of these is firm, one of these is stiff, and one of these is hard. All right, so there is a difference between these words. I mean, you could say, really, I mean, I remember when I learnt these, I learnt them all as hard, and it's like, well, that doesn't really help you much, because these get used in different situations. Okay, so this kind of issue with I guess these are homophones, but anyway. And radicals link, okay? Really, this website is all about radicals. I believe that says it somewhere. Anyway, but this is kind of how it works. All right, we've got a search box as well. There's a search up the top right here. It's kind of cut off, but you can see about a third of it. All right, so we can search for things. All right, and we got some support. I mean, and I would really recommend, I mean, if you like resources like this and you find them useful, even if you got, 10 minutes or 20 minutes of usage out of that, you really should donate to these people. I mean, this website is really a work of art. Whoever it is has spent a lot of time putting this all together. It's very kind of interlinked to each other. So definitely, I mean, you can like the page, but I would at least consider donating, if you use the resource and you found it useful. You can subscribe to his newsletter. He sends out newsletters as well, which are pretty good. Okay. So let's kind of go through this. Now, I'm not going to read all this, but I'll just kind of talk about it. So, I mean, I really agree with this. This is like the kanji book that I wish I had. You really need to know about hiragana and katakana. And it's people fed up with other methods. Okay. Now, this is a very important point, okay? Japanese is hard, don't get me wrong. I mean, I tend to say it's not that hard. I think the grammar is not so bad. The words are not that hard. The pronunciation is not that tricky. But the kanji itself, trust me, this is a big part of the language, and you can't really avoid not learning kanji if you want to get good at Japanese, I would say, unless you're kind of like born to Japanese parents and raised to speak Japanese. But someone like me, where that didn't happen, I think you really need to know kanji. But really, what he talks about here is the real problem is the way it's taught, okay? And this is not limited to people who teach Japanese who are not native speakers either. Because, of course, we would expect native speakers to not be that good at teaching their own language unless they've kind of taken a course on it, maybe. But it's weird that this problem persists. And really, the problem is that, I just kind of teach kanji how I learned kanji. And this is not really the best way. There's much better ways, and this is really what this website is about. So he talks about this thing, can't teach Japanese like you teach German. I mean, he's really referring to the bit here where they kind of group similar words together, right? And he gives some examples about it, but he says like, you'll learn all the words for climate. It'll be hot, cold, windy, rainy, all this stuff. All the weather words will all be grouped together. I think, well, this is kind of logical. Why not do it like that way? But kanji doesn't really work like that. I mean, the kanji for all the different climate is not really related. I mean, we'll see there's a lot of radicals which are in common, but otherwise it's not that good. The other thing he says is you can't teach kanji without radicals, okay? Now, I've mentioned this word radicals quite a few times. We're going to see what it is, but basically it's like a letter. If we want to think of the equivalence to an English word, it's a letter of a word, okay? But we need to know radicals. And we can't teach synonyms by teaching them all the same English definition, okay? This is that issue we just looked at with katai, okay? You just can't do it. What's the synonyms, all right? I get that you need to use a similar word, but not the same word. There is a nuance there. And you can't teach verbs that including the prepositions, okay? And we'll look at that a bit later. Basically, particles. Okay. All right, and again, this is an issue, trust me, that's not just limited to Japanese. This really in every single academic sphere, I've got to say this is a problem. You have what's called a selection bias, okay? People who can make it to this PhD level, lecturer level, whatever. I mean, even someone like me, people who can make it to this point where you're able to teach something, it's not necessarily just because you can do it that you're a good teacher or that you understand fundamentally how it works. Now, this is because maybe we don't really know why this is, but my guess is that some people's brains are wired really differently, and some people are really good at some things like math, and some people are really good at the more humanitarian things. They're much better maybe with higher verbal IQ or whatever it may be, but there's something about certain people which makes them very good at doing things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can teach it, all right? I mean, how many times have you come across this where even in English, someone asks you, hey, why do you say it this way in English and not this way? And you're like, I don't know, it just is. It's just that way. So that's not an answer that satisfies anyone. But as a native speaker, that's all you can really do. You can just say, well, this is how it's said. That's how I've always heard it. And when you say it the way you say it, it sounds weird. That's all you can really do. And the same thing happens with kanji. Now, he talks about why this is, basically the issue of lookalikes. We've got ushi here, and we've got, I guess you would read this as, I'm not sure, sure, I don't know, but basically go, All right. And, you know, they look very similar, except we see that there's a little bit poking out the top of cow. All right. And then, you know, kuruma and big, and then you can't see how they relate to these kanji. Okay, so there's a lot of issues. And again, I mean, I've suffered from the same problem as well. I mean, so much of this stuff I learned back in 2003, you know, talking 16 years ago now. I mean, I've internalized it and I've seen it so many ways since then that I don't really think about it anymore, but I can imagine how this is an issue for beginners. All right, and I like his kind of self-deprecating humor here. He's saying, you know, I still suck. Still no good at it. Okay. Now, there's a few things here. I mean, I can show you some. I've in previous kanji videos, I've actually linked to these kind of things. But you'll see very commonly when you look at textbooks and you look at, you know, kanji cards, all this stuff, there'll be all this data on there, which you have no idea what it is and it's not explained anywhere. So the kanji number, you think, well, what does this mean? Does it mean I have to start at 0? Do I have to start at 100? Is it bad if I start from 500? The dictionary number is like, okay, useless. You know, these kind of things, sunshine, computer direction, graph memes, right? So basically like the computer code that you need to type in or the database where it's in, just like absolutely useless information, but it'll appear on all these kanji cards. And you think, well, am I supposed to know it? Am I supposed to not know it? Stroke order, radicals, all these kind of things. And so, you know, basically saying, yeah, and all this extra information doesn't help. And that's really true. This is another really big problem. You kind of, you know, you have kind of two different types of materials. You have kanji materials meant for Japanese people, and then kanji materials basically meant for non-Japanese people. Now, I always used to prefer the ones made for Japanese people because they're a lot more complete. They'll show all the readings of the kanji. They'll show like some of the common words. And if there's a testing section, they'll test you on all the weird exceptions because the expectation for Japanese people is a lot higher. And, you know, it's their language. They have to be able to know every single permutation. But for ones meant for non-Japanese, they tend to cut out a lot of stuff, which, okay, pragmatically speaking, this is okay, but most of the time it's like you kind of need to know these at some point. So then you have to revisit the kanji and learn it again. So, I mean, I've done a previous kanji video where I go through the materials I learned, and you'll see in that book that one of the books I really liked was a juku book, right, a cram school book that my host brother had, because it just had everything in there. And it was a lot to learn, but it meant I didn't have to revisit kanji later to learn stuff, or I would try to read something, and some Japanese person would go, oh no, he's got this reading in it, which I've never even heard of before. Okay. Now he gives no context, all right? This is another big issue. So he goes through these examples. I won't go through them. But basically it's like, if you don't know the context of these words, you're just going to kind of use them as you would in English, and then it's going to be weird. All right. Dictionaries, you know, if you look up certain things in the dictionary, you're going to have too much information. Again, you don't know what word is used more, what word is used less. In Japanese, of course, we have formal language as well. So which one's formal, which one's casual. And he kind of talks about this uketori, ryoshu sho, which is, this is actually one of the more common words, but juryosho, juryosho. Yeah, juryosho and juryosho, okay? And then, you know, the word you actually use is rishito, okay? Not all the time. I mean, I worked in a hotel, so we had to say ryoshu sho a lot. So try and say that 3 times fast. It's not easy. And yeah, so that's the issue with dictionaries, okay? So this is what I used to do. I would look stuff up in my kanji book, and then I'd look up the dictionary, and then between the two, I would like have all this useless information. So I always used to check all this stuff with my host mom and say, hey, what's the deal with this? And she would say, oh, you know, this one, you don't even worry about it. This one is one you have to know. Okay. And again, we just got this issue with Japanese. You know, Japanese and English are very different languages, so you need to know things in context, otherwise, you know, you're basically learning useless information. You need to know what it is. Okay, he gives another example of kyoku and omoide, yononaka and chikyu. Okay. This thing I mentioned before, the climate stuff. Okay. All right, and then this is kind of the whole problem, and this is why he makes the website. Okay. The meaning of these kanji is pretty simple, all right? I mean, I kind of glanced over it, but, you know, cool, warm, hot, all this kind of stuff. So they're really complex, especially atsui, okay? And I remember I learned this kanji really early on because it was in my textbook, and I was thinking, I don't even need this. And they have no radicals, okay? They're kind of letters in common. So when you learn one, it doesn't help you learn the next one. Okay, and then by the time you get back to and you see another kanji which finally uses this radical, you've forgotten it. So then you're not having a lot of building on Japanese that you already know. Okay, so again, we've got bad language here. But yeah, how people teach it is not so great. All right, so now you compare it to his book. It's not really a book. Maybe he sells a book, but you know, we have this radical here, and we see we have all these kanji which contains this radical, okay? And this is what my JLPT book actually does, which I like as well. And that's why I bought that book, because I thought, oh, this is so much better. It's arranging them by radical, because the issue with that is, well, the good thing about that is, is that radicals often have common readings. So once you know one radical, you can then, most of the time, know the readings for lots of other kanji. Okay, probably need to fix that up, otherwise it's my browser, I don't know. But we see some radicals, and we have, you know, this is string, this is basically, it's called two-branch tree. We have hand, the really small man, I'm not really sure what that guy would be, but, you know, hito, basically. Yeah, this guy nimben, and kuchi. All right, so we got mouth. So yeah, we'll kind of know that. And you'll see here, so learning from scratch, you'll be merely rearranging parts. And again, when we see this in some examples, this will make a lot more sense. Okay, so that's a kind of introduction to why Japanese is taught poorly. Mainly kanji is taught poorly, but trust me, this applies to Japanese as well. And this is why I recommend Take Him's Basic Guide to Grammar. He does kind of the same thing. He helps you build on what you've already learned rather than just throwing random bits of grammar at you. Okay, so there's kind of four things. Yeah, 4 different strategies. All right, first of all, he arranges the kanji by radical. Okay, so we don't learn some crazy big complex kanji. And in fact, if we go by here, I believe it is, we'll see that the very first one that we learn is the number 1. Now, this is not unusual, by the way. Pretty much every kanji program I've ever done starts with 1, 2, 3. But then we'll notice we don't go to 4, and we go to this guy, and then we see that child is actually just total with a line through it. And it just kind of keeps going down like that, okay? So they all build on each other, which is really good. Okay. And he's really just saying, you know, once we learn a few radicals and a few kanji, then we learn, you know, basically it multiplies logarithmically, I guess, where you just kind of go, well, this new kanji is just that one I've already learned, and this one, and put them together, right? Warning labels for fucked up kanji. Okay, yes. Look at these, cheating. All right, now when he's talking about cheating, he takes the JLPT kanji, all right, levels 1 to 4, and the Joyo kanji. I'm guessing this is a bit old. Anyway, the kanji for level 5 is included in 4. And the Joyo kanji, which is about 2,000-ish, I can't remember either how many it is, which is meant for the Japanese people. I mentioned this right at the beginning. And he combines them and then gets rid of a lot of useless ones. Now, there are plenty of useless ones in there, so that's good. Yeah, this kind of stuff, right? You know, you'll read the English definition, like, I don't even know what that means. Now, this is the other really good thing I like about this guy's website is, you know, I knew a lot of radicals, but then there are all these other radicals which I recognized, and I would just kind of go, oh, it's the radical from that left side of the kanji. But he's given them names, okay? So there's kind of like a pool of radicals from which Japanese people have given specific names, and if you say these words to Japanese people, like nimben, gyo nimben, all these kind of things, Japanese people will be able to write them, and they'll put them on the right side of the kanji as well, or the left side of the kanji, as the case may be. But then there are all these other kanji, which radicals, that this kanji damage website has given a name for. Okay, so you kind of have to learn those as you go through his website, but the names we'll see are pretty logical, so it's not exactly that hard. And really, Japanese people already do this. They just do it like, you know, I do it the way the Japanese people do it. Just go, oh, it's that bit from the top bit of whatever kanji, okay? So he's just given the names to make it a bit easier, and we'll see that the website is all linked to each other, so you can click on the radical and it will take you to all that. Okay, so yeah, he arbitrarily gives it a name and threw it into the mix. Yeah, I mean, this is crazy. I mean, I don't know anyone who's ever said, oh my gosh, I studied kanji for 12 months from scratch and now I can't read newspaper. I don't think I've ever met anyone like that. Maybe Koreans or something might be like that because they've got a pretty good background in Japanese generally, but yeah. Okay, they're not strategy, more philosophy. Okay. Let's go. Now, basic facts, I'm pretty much not going to talk about this. I would give you a read. give it a read. So we have radicals, okay? So we have these kind of things which are absolute radicals. They're never kanji on their own, right? They're just a building block, okay? Don't have pronunciation and don't have any meaning, okay? Keep that in mind. No pronunciations, no meaning. And it's really just trying to think of radicals like letters. Okay, see here, English. Just like English, radicals are combined in largely random combinations to make kanji. Radicals don't have any real meaning. Now that's not really true. We'll see that some radicals kind of have a meaning, but it's not always consistent. Let's just say that. Okay. Now he says over 5,000. I think there's over 50,000 kanji, but most of them aren't really a part of Japanese anymore. But yeah, I mean, if you knew 5,000 kanji, you would be basically, you're getting, you know, if you could write 5,000 kanji, you would kind of be on the same level as someone like a university professor, like a lecturer or something. You need to know a lot. But yeah, 2,000 or so, this is normally the goal. Like if you want to be kind of consider yourself proficient at Japanese, 2,000 is good. And it'll take quite a few years. Okay, and yeah, Jukugo just got combat words. Okay, symbolic radicals. Okay, so these are kind of like the absolute radicals, no pronunciation, never kanji by themselves, but they do have a meaning. Okay, so I don't know, he's kind of inconsistent when he talks about this, because obviously some radicals do have meanings. So we have this guy, this is yarare. Okay, and we see it's associated with sickness, so it's used in quite a few kanji, and they all have something to do with sickness. Okay, so we got itai, byo, this is tsukareru. This is the ri from geri. This is sho, it's a symptom. So we see that they have something to do with it, okay? And maybe the most common one a lot of you guys will know is this guy, because this is the byo from byo-in, which is hospital. Okay, now kanji, even really complex kanji, can be radicals, okay? So this guy, it kind of means director, and you think it's pretty big, and it's got like quite a few strokes in it, and it's already made up of radicals itself. You know, we got plate on the bottom here, got princess on the left. Well, I think it's a minister or something on the left. And then we have this guy, you know, we have the kind of the gold radical on the left here, and it becomes an expert opinion. And we have stuff like this, you know, these are the one probably, if you guys got any kind of background in kanji, you'll be really familiar with these ones, but we got mizu and ki. And then when we stuff them inside other stuff, we get lots of words. So here, this is like appearance. This is to swim. This is a forest. We can see there's 3 trees in it, therefore a forest. I actually have no idea what this kanji is. Let's have a look. Fish gone. Okay, I don't feel bad about not knowing this now. Woodworker, kokuji. Okay, yes, that's a very, not exactly a useful kanji, let's just say that, because kokuji is a yeah, it's the kanji that originated in Japan. You can't really see, okay, you can see that. Okay. Okay, now, so basically these ones are good because, again, you know, these can be kanji by themselves, but when they're radicals, they all kind of keep their original meaning. So kanji with a tree in them have to do with wooden things most of the time. Kanji with fire, them are about fire, etc. Not always, but most of the time. Okay, now again, this is a really important section, and I would encourage you guys to read this section a few times, but this is really important. Okay, so we got some myths. And these are always going to be the problem. We want to get rid of our myths, dispel the myths, the pernicious myths. Okay, radicals always mean something. Now I got to admit, I thought this for a long time, but this is not true. This is not true. And kanji look like the things they describe. Now I never really had a problem with this second myth. I think I just kind of accepted that this was a writing system that had been simplified, so it's not always going to look like the original thing. It's not really like hieroglyphics or whatever that is. But the first one for sure, I guess I struggled with this one for a while. Okay, so people always do this, right? They look at a kanji and they go, oh, well, look in the middle. It's got kind of a different version of mushi in it, you know, kaze and mushi. You know, why does bamboo have take up the top of it? You know, why does sake have west in it? And then really what this website, and I've never thought of the good words to describe it, but this website does it. He says, what are some ESL guys, English as a second language person, point to the word fire and goes, what does R mean? You know, what does E mean? And it's like, well, it's kind of a silly question to ask. It's letters combined in certain order have a certain meaning. You know, if you say fighter, why is the R at the end? Why isn't it at the beginning? It's like, well, that will become a different word. And it's kind of the same thing. And as he points out, you know, gaijin, this is the word for foreigner. A lot of students can spend years of nothing but asking those types of questions. He says, I know I did, and trust me, I did as well. I used to think, why is it that, you know, sometimes these radicals are in certain words and not in other words, and it just seems to make no sense. And yes, so we're going to see that the problem is that most teachers suck. I mean, I would kind of put, I mean, I'm not great, but at least I kind of am aware of some things, and once we kind of learn these things, it'll make it a lot better. Okay, so we got some kind of equivalences here. So radicals equal letters, all right? So just how letters can't really change order in a word and then go, why is this letter here, why is this letter here? Radicals are the same. They kind of go in certain spots and they mean that way. And if it's not there and it's in a different position, it's obviously going to be a different word, or it could just be nonsensical if you've written it wrong. Words equal the kanji themselves, okay? So this is not so hard to grasp. A kanji itself has a meaning, okay? So notice he says words, because a kanji can't always be distilled down into a single word. And in fact, what I tend to do now with my kanji study is when I'll learn a kanji, I'll kind of learn, I mean, I'll obviously try and learn as many readings as I can and try and learn what those words mean. And then I kind of think, well, a kanji is kind of like, just say there's like 3 readings of a kanji. When I get the kanji, I'm like, well, it kind of is a little bit of the first meaning, a little bit of the second meaning, a little bit of the third meaning. And it's just kind of this new meaning in English. And sometimes you can capture that with an English word, sometimes you can't. So you just kind of go between the two. And we have jukugo, which are compound words, all right? So these are like hyphenated words, I guess, if you want to think about it that way. But this is, this will, once you get better at kanji and kind of understand the logic, jukugo are probably the least of your issues. It's really just you get one kanji and another kanji, put them together, and you kind of combine the 2 meanings of that kanji, and then you can work out what it is. And like I said, once you get the logic to this, it'll be a lot easier. All right, so it's kind of this idea of fire and fighter, right? Is a firefighter. Okay, now this is the other thing, which is a big issue with people learning kanji. Now, we'll go here, you look at these and you go, man, these look really hard to write, and then these look really simple. So surely I should start with these ones. It's like, well, no, that's not really a good way to approach it. Okay, but then we look at these, okay, a verb to put on pants. Now in Japanese, you kind of have different verbs for different parts of clothing. So this is very common. You know, this is a tooth, color of purple, a monkey, got a face, me, listen, nose. Now I remember I learned face kind of early on. I think, man, this is such a hard kanji for such a common word. And then you might go, well, let's look at these simple ones then. Well, a color called cinnabar, okay, which I believe is some kind of red color. A garrison of 17th century troops under the command of a shogun. And so then you might be going, well, when am I ever going to need to know this word? I mean, even Japanese people might even struggle with this one, even though it's like basically four strokes in this country. There's nothing there, and you would really only need to know this for you take a class in Japan called Nihonchi, which is Japanese history. So you need to know all the kind of historical kanji. But when we're trying to think about, well, we want to get to a point where we can read and understand Japanese today in the 21st century, we don't really need to know this kind of word. You know, maybe later on you can, but pragmatically, you've got to think, I've only got a certain amount of time to study. Might as well do stuff which is actually useful. Okay, we've got a unit of management. Now, this is actually useful as a radical to learn, but yeah, not as a kanji in and of itself. A specific kind of cedar. See, even this I didn't know. I just thought this was the kanji for cedar tree. So even I don't even know that. And a dowager empress. Okay, some kind of crazy word that again is historical and you wouldn't really need to know. Okay, so yeah, this is the secret. There's going to be really complex kanji which are very useful and you need all the time. And there is ones which are super simple, which you'll never ever need to use. And even Japanese people, like if you did a survey of them, won't know it. Okay, so we have this issue where it's like, okay, if you're gonna learn some language, and he says normal language, I don't really like this term, but if you're gonna learn some other non-Japanese language, you might start with simple words and work up to adult words. But if you try and do that with kanji, just like this list we just saw, it's not going to work. Okay, you're just going to have to learn. You just basically got to memorize these really hard kanji. And this is what I used to do. I used to have to try and memorize things like this one, kao. Okay, and then I'd always forget it. Like a week or 2 weeks later, when I had to write it again, I would be thinking, oh my gosh, I could read it, but I could never write it. So this is what this website teaches you. It teaches you a technique that you won't forget it. Okay, and yeah, he's just kind of talking about, you know, you'll learn, if you learn a simple kanji which you never use, later on when you use words like this one, which is really common, this means a building, and this means to rip something, I believe. Yeah, to split, that's right. Yeah, to basically take something apart. Then you'd be like, oh my gosh, I mean, I learned these ages ago and it's kind of useless. You know, why didn't I learn these? You know, why did you teach these ones first? Maybe it'd be better to start from there. Yeah, and here's how the Japanese teach your own children. Yeah, it's kind of sad. I mean, I think there's a lot of wasted effort in kanji study in Japan, and I think if more people followed techniques like this, it'd be a lot better. Okay, and again, he's just giving some more examples of radicals, which are really common. Okay, now again, bushu, this is the word, Japanese word for radicals. Thankfully, for some reason, actually it was mainly because of that Juku book I mentioned before, but I kind of worked out early on that, I shouldn't say that, the book made it very clear that learning radicals early on is handy, okay? And the book was good because it had, under the kanji, it would have a separate box which showed the radical, and then in brackets, it would show the kanji that radical came from. So it's not a good example, but was a good one. Like this one's a good one, okay? We see rain, this is the kanji, but when it's put on a radical, we'll see it's a lot smaller. It's just kind of occupying the top part of the word. So yeah, we can see that there are, when it's becoming the radical, it looks a bit different. So that's what it would do. It would have this, it would show the radical and it would show this kanji next to it. Not a great example, I guess, but generally. Okay, so yeah, radicals are the ABCs of kanji. And yeah, I mean, again, thankfully to me, this is not such a mind-blowing statement, but I know a lot of people who are trying to learn kanji and basically failing, that this would be something which they weren't aware of. And yes, I mean, I'm not sure I totally agree with this. Like I said, my Juku book kind of did it, but it didn't make it obvious. I'll say that. Yeah, and this is a very important thing. He's going to teach that there'll never be a bit when you learn a kanji where you be like, okay, it's that radical, and then it's just kind of lines in some order, and then you up the same problem that I had with kao, where you could never remember what order the lines are in. And this is why that Yorokobu one, where the samurai threw beans into the mouth, is really good, because you know, you remember every single element of that kanji with that story. Okay, and again, you know, we're going to come up against probably some pushback from some Japanese people who've learned it a certain way, and like, well, you can't teach people that these things are radicals because they're not radicals. And it's like, okay, fine, I mean, I get it, but this is what his website is about. There are a lot of gaps in the teaching of kanji that, yeah, a native speaker can get by with through a lot of study and effort throughout school. You can save a lot of heartache, but by just kind of including some of these into radicals. And it's like, okay, maybe we should invent a different word for them and not call them radicals, but it's just much easier to include them under the radical umbrella. Okay, just gonna go through some stuff. Yeah, and just some other things. Okay, now he's going to kind of talk about it here. So you learn this. This is a kanji. It means day. It means sun, really. And then you learn this nest. Okay, an absolute radical with no meaning. Okay, so you just kind of know it as nest. Now, why does he pick nest? Well, it's really kind of a hindsight thing, but he looked at all the kanji which kind of include this bit, and then he kind of goes, well, best way is it kind of looks like a nest, and in all the mnemonics I'm going to make, I'll use this nest reading. Okay, so this is obviously this is the big reason why I would kind of encourage you to donate to this website, because for him to get to this kind of to make up this kind of meaning for this would have taken a lot of effort and a lot of time, and he probably went back and had to rename a whole bunch of things and retype all these things. So yeah, he's done a lot of work to get to this point. We learned friend, okay? And then now we have the mnemonic, okay? The crows are friends, so they live in the same nest, okay? And now we get this. We get this guy. All right, and we say the crows get warm in the sun. All right, so basically he's saying this whole thing is a crow. He's going to call it a crow radical. Yeah, and again, it's the ivory tower issue, okay? So people were aware of these kind of separate things, which are called graphemes, or whatever, however you say that. But I was never aware of these for sure. Okay, and okay, he talks about this. I would really look at this picture, and this is how I used to kind of conceptualize kanji. I look at this and go, okay, there's a mountain, and you know, but what does this kanji even mean? It's not really much to do with mountain. But this one, he's gonna teach you to every single color, right? Is included, so you don't have to remember anything. You just have to remember that the director makes you go to the mountain, you get a teeny weeny slice of pie. Now, teeny weeny slice of pie is really what this kanji means. It means like small or very minute or something like that. Okay. Now, so here's some other things. Now, I'm not sure I'm totally on board with this, but I'm going to explain it because I do see his logic. And I think maybe this is part of me, which is kind of, you know, a lot of Japanese people have taught me to think in this way, and maybe I'm finding it hard a bit to let go of it, but I can see the utility in it. So first order, stroke order. Now, this is one thing that Japanese people really care a lot about, okay? And it's kind of crazy to me, but you know, you can pick a kanji, find someone in Japan, ask them to write it, and watch the order that they write each stroke in and which stroke goes where. And then you find someone in a totally different part of Japan and ask them to do the same thing. Just go, hey, write this kanji, and they'll write it the same way. Okay, it's nuts. You've got tens and tens of millions of people in Japan who all write kanji the same way because this is how it's taught in school. So, I mean, I used to kind of say it's good to do the stroke order because, especially when you're writing quickly, it helps you kind of write quickly, kind of get this robotic way of writing, but it's a lot to remember. It's just another data point you have to remember, and if you're going to follow the mnemonic thing where you remember the mnemonics like his website does, I guess I would agree that its stroke order is not that important anymore. Okay, you just get you know, looks from Japanese people. All right, kunyomi. Now this is just some vocabulary we're going to have to know. This is the way the kanji is pronounced by itself. So this guy is sake. Okay, now it has another reading, which we'll see is the onyomi, but think of the kunyomi as like the Japanese word, all right? Because obviously kanji comes from China, and then the Japanese had to give it a Japanese reading, okay? So that's what a kunyomi is, okay? So generally single kanji have a kunyomi, and it tends to be, well, not always, but it tends to be verb or adjective. I mean, really it can be anything. Okay, so we got kunyomis, all right? And generally, this is the first thing you want to learn about a kanji. You want to learn the English meaning, I guess, and then you want to learn the kunyomi. Next, onyomi, it's the Chinese pronunciation, right? Notice this word, pronunciation. And it's really only used generally when you form a compound word of it, okay? So we said before that this was sake, but when we put this in a compound, so with other kanji, it's pronounced shu. So this is inshu unten, okay? So here you wouldn't read it as sake. And yeah, he talks about why the onyomis are not really Chinese. Basically, this is because, you know, it's like, you know, they don't really sound like the Chinese pronunciation anymore because Japanese people were kind of learnt these in China. Then, you know, they were traders or whatever. They would come back to Japan, teach this to Japanese people, and then the pronunciation would just change so much. You can see that there's like common linguistic groups, but generally they're very different. Okay. Yeah, and he teaches the onyomi is not a radical, which is very interesting, and we'll look at that in a bit more detail later. Okay. So yeah, he gives them radicals. Yeah, this is really interesting to read, by the way, to know. But I'm not going to go through it right now. Okay, so how do we know? Well, when do we use the kunyomi and the onyomi? Well, kunyomi is generally where we have a single kanji, or if we have a kanji with some kind of trailing okurigana, hiragana, which is called okurigana. Proper nouns, generally it's going to be kunyomi. So these are names, right? Names of people, names of places. Jukugo is like a compound word I mentioned before, like firefighter. So here we have, this is shurui. So this is like a type. Basically, both of these mean a type of something. So together it's like a species or a variation or something. This means China. This means character. So all these things we're looking at now are kanji. This is the kanji for kanji. And this is tetsugaku, this is philosophy. But anyway, you have lots of compounds like this, and they always use onyomi basically. Yeah. Okay, and again, just look at this table, but don't worry about it too much. Okay, yeah, learn jukugo. This is really important, number one. You know, you explore that. I mentioned this before, you kind of have to like know a few jukugo to kind of understand the true meaning of a kanji. Helps you remember the onyomi, okay? I mean, you never really want to learn a kanji and just memorize the onyomi. You want to remember it in a word like kanji, you want to remember, because then you go, oh, that's the kan from kanji. That's the character from kanji. And is it the first or the second? I think it's the first. And then you'll know it to read it in another word. This is a really important point. Kanji really increases your vocabulary, so that's why you want to learn jukugo. And you already talked about this before, symphones, homophones. So all these are kanji. He talks about a funny one. Yeah, so you write in these words in the dictionary and look how many results you get. The other one is kikan. He didn't write that one, but kikan has quite a few as well. And he's homophones. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to make a part 2 of this video. I think it's gone on for quite a while. So this is a basic part 1 breakdown to kanji damage, and we'll start looking at the actual way the website works in the next video. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next week.